go over how to do a proper blow dry or a proper blowout using a round brush. So I do have her prepped. I shampooed and conditioned her using Breckin Princess Mist, and then I did put some foundation and some working product in her. So I have one United and some full frame, and I distributed that pretty evenly and combed it through really well. So now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rough blow dry her with my blow dryer with the concentrator on it, and I'm just going to use my fingers. And what I want to do is get rid of about 50 to 60% of the moisture, not really too much more than that, so we don't break too many bonds and they start to dry in a form that we don't want for that blowout or for that style. So I'm going to do that real quick. Alright, so I want her to be damp but not soaking wet. If we dry her too much, when we go back in with our round brush, we're going to have to re-manipulate a lot of the bonds with a lot of heat and a lot of tension from the blow dryer and from the brush. That's going to cause a lot of wear and tear on the hair in the long run. So it's easier to keep her more on the damp side so that we can manipulate and mold the bonds how we want using a round brush and heat and tension, but it's not excessive and it's not overdoing it on your guest canvas. So now next thing we do is I'm going to go ahead and section her off. And what I'm doing is I'm sectioning out everything along her perimeter or her hairline. So from that point, I'm going to have this to work with. So I'm going to take this center of her head and I'm going to split that. I'm going to have the top as my last domain, and then I have 3 small subsections under that. When you're sectioning for your blow dry, you don't have to have clean, consistent parting like you would if you were doing a haircut. We just need to get the hair out of the way, and to control it, it's going to make it easier when we actually go in with the blow dryer and the brush if our sections are clipped up and out of the way. Makes for a nice clean working section and clean consistent section. Another good thing is if we Zulu knot it, which is what I have done up top, keeping a nice tight bun, that will help keep the moisture in the hair. So the bonds that we broke when we shampooed her will stay broken until we actually dry it, so we can get them in the shape that we want them to be. I'm going to go and do my next section here. I'm going to clip that out of the way. Good stay. Pull her down a little and do these last 2. Now, if your guest has a small head or they have really low density within their hair, you could probably split the whole center section of this into 3 versus 4. For today's purpose, I'm going to do 4 in the back, but you could change that based off of whatever canvas or head shape that you were working with. So this will be what she looks like from the profile, from the back, from the side, from the top, from the front. So the reason why I have her sectioned out like this, and this is just my personal preference, kind of like how I was taught how to blow dry, so I just go with it. I like approaching different parts on the head in different techniques. And the reason why I do that is because I cater my blow dry for that person's density, texture, and their natural head shape. So I have her hairline sectioned out first because I want to blow dry that first. The reasons why I want to do that is because the hairline is the most fragile on everybody's head. It's also where you see the least amount of density on your head, and that is pretty much on everybody in the whole entire world. So we want to be able to wet that, dry that, manipulate it how we need it to be, and get it done and dry quick. If this starts to dry before we can go in and reform the bonds in the shape that we want them to be, we're going to have to use extra heat and use extra tension to reform it how we need it to be nice and smooth with some volume, maybe a little bit of a curl. Because that hairline is so fragile, we don't want to have to do excessive heat and excessive tension. So if we approach that first, we're able to get that out of the way without any concerns or wear and tear in the hair. Everything we do is to maintain integrity of your guest's hair. So we need to really take that into consideration. The next thing or reason why I like to do that is because it gives your guest something to look at. When your guest is looking at themselves in the mirror with a cape on and wet hair, it's usually not that flattering. So if we can blow dry this first, it'll give her kind of a little bit more ease while she's sitting there. She feels more comfortable. Maybe she can see the color sitting around her face. The water's not dripping down in her face. It relaxes your guest, and it also protects your guest's hair. In the back, it's pretty much the same. I didn't take too much of the hairline. 2 or 3 fingers up from the back is pretty standard if you're going to blow dry the hairline first. When you are doing the front section, I did a little further back than the standard hairline would be about here. I went back to where her frontal bone stops. So if I was to place the base of my finger, so right here, on her forehead and curve, it's going to be right where my second knuckle is on my middle finger, is usually right around where your frontal bone is. And I base it off of whatever the guest's head shape is anyway. But if you get, if you get that part of the section blow dry first, which would be considered her fringe, or like her face trim area, we want to control where her natural fall is going to be. So being able to blow dry that first, that's going to let her fall naturally, or give me control of where I want her hair to be before it starts to dry in the shape it naturally falls. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have 2 choices in brushes, so my medium and my large. Since we are going to put a little bit of a curl on these brushes, a smaller one will give you a tighter curl. It's going to last a little longer versus a larger one for more body. I'm going to stick with the medium one because that's just my personal preference, but you can use whatever you would like to do based off of her end result and what her hair type is and what her length is. Sections should really be no larger than what the tool is, just like if you're doing a roller set or a thermal set. We don't really want to be any bigger than that because it's going to take longer to blow dry, and more wear and tear on our hair, more wear and tear on our shoulders, our elbows, our joints, and all that. So I'm going to blow dry the front of her first, and that's going to consist of where her natural recession is on both sides. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take where her natural part is, or where her hair wants to part. I'm going to take a small subsection on each side of that part, and I'm going to stand in front of her and blow dry that towards me. What that is going to create is a little bit of volume here, but consistent volume all the way down. If I try to blow dry with her part, if she does part it here and I take my brush and I try and blow dry here, what that's going to do is create a little bit of flatness here and more volume here. So it's not going to be consistent when it falls. We want it to look as natural as possible. So this will let it fall without seeing any lines of demarcation, and it's going to look like that's where her hair wants to fall, and not that it was styled that way. When you go to take your section, make sure you do brush through it really well, just so the brush doesn't get snagged as you're pulling on it with the blow dryer. So it's about that wide, and I'm going to take it only as wide as my brush too. So I'm not really going too far over. This will probably be broken up into 3 subsections. When I'm approaching my blowout with my brush, I want to concentrate majority of my heat and tension on the zone 1 and zone 2. So that is your regrowth, and then your cold zone, which is your midshaft. And that's because that is the most newest hair. It also has the most bonds or stronger bonds that we need to be broken and to reform. So apply a lot of tension in those areas, focusing most on zone 1, moving to zone 2, and then her ends, which is zone 3, That's the most lived in part, so that has seen the most environmental damage, the most stress, the most wear and tear. It's the most porous, it's the most fragile. This doesn't need as much manipulation, it doesn't need as much heat. So I can gently go over zone 3 a little bit less with less heat than I would on 1 and 2. Concentrator should always be on. I'm using high heat and high air to make sure I'm getting consistent flow, and then I'm able to smooth the cuticle while drying it. I'm concentrating majority of my heat and rotation of my brush just on zone 1 and zone 2. I had not brought my brush down to zone 3 at all. When you come underneath and apply your concentrator this way, that enables you to control how you want this hair to sit right at her face. It also, by approaching your subsection on top and bottom, it gives her more movability from left, right, top, bottom, so it looks more natural when it actually falls. And she'll get more movement out of the blow dry itself. As I'm working my way down to zone 3, I'm dropping the elevation to make her more off base. So this is about half base. I pulled it out at 90 degrees. I didn't over direct it away from me to create too much volume. Just that's personal preference. I don't like too much lift right in the front. I like to focus my lift on the round of the head. So I did about half base, and now once I get to zone 3, I'm going to drop my elbow and bring her down to off base. And then I'm going to apply some heat to zone 3, manipulate a little bit, and then I'm going to cool it so that the bonds can form in the shape I want them to be with the brush. I like to take the back of my blow dryer while it's still running and place it on your brush. That is going to suck the hot air out without disrupting the cuticle layers, so it stays nice and smooth when it actually cools. You can use the cool shot as well if you would like to. I don't really like to use the cool shot because I still feel like that air is pushing the cuticle in a lot of different directions, even if it is cold air. I just like the back, just because it's personal preference. I feel like it seals a little bit better and gives me more control of how smooth I want that section to be. Now my brush is horizontal, so for me to drop it and give it a little bit of a twirl, I'm just going to bring it vertical. And then as I unwind it, I'm going to pull down at the same time. So she has a nice little curl at the end. So we want to make sure we don't touch that as it's cooling, so those bonds can reform in that new curled shape that we just created with the heat. We want every subsection to be as hot as it would be if it was a curling iron. If it is still damp when we go to drop the brush or move on to zone 2 and zone 3, it's not going to be a consistent curl, and as the whole head starts to dry and cool, her root is going to be more frizzy or less volume than her 2 and 3 where you applied more heat. So try and keep your heat consistent on all 3 sections, remembering that zone 3 is the most fragile, so it's not going to need the heat as long, but we still want to be just as hot as 1 and 2. So that would be the front of her. So now you have a choice to start at the ear and work your way to center back, or start in center back and work your way to the ear. That doesn't really matter how you approach that. You do have the option to catch the hair with your hand if you don't want to use your blow dryer nozzle here. That's also personal preference. I do like to use the blow dryer because our hands have a lot of oil on them naturally, and then us touching it constantly is going to actually raise the pH of the hair, and that's going to in turn create a lot of frizziness or puffiness within the hair strand, and that's going to defeat the purpose of our hair being nice and smooth from the blowout. So I'm going to start in the center back, and back here I don't want a lot of volume, so I'm not going to over direct it. I'm not going to blow dry at 90. I'm going to be below, maybe like a 45, a little bit higher, and that's because if you put too much volume in the nape, what happens is that from the front the hair ends up sitting out like this, so you can see through the hair on somebody all the time. That's not very flattering, and it makes somebody look like they have really, really fine hair, even if they have a ton of hair. So I like to do a little bit less volume here so the hair kind of hugs the head. It makes it look fuller, so great for somebody who does have fine or low density, but it also gets rid of that see-throughness of a silhouette when you're looking at somebody from the front. I also don't like to add too much volume around the ears, just because, unless it's the style they're going for, but most people don't want to make the sides of their face appear larger, so I like to keep that a little bit closer or hugging the face with a curl towards the end if that's what they prefer, because it gives more of a balanced and flattering silhouette. Now all her hairline is completely dry all the way around. So I'm going to work into my bottom subsection, and that is right below the occipital above the nape. I'm going to go ahead and drop this. I can probably fit that into 2 sections. Depending how wide her head is, it might need to be 3. So now here I'm going to do a little bit more volume than I did in the back. So if my back was around 50 degrees of elevation, I'll probably do like 60 here. So not completely 90, but a little bit more. And I'm going to change my direction or my elevation as I'm moving up the head. So once I get to where the occipital bone would be, I'm going to hold this out at 90. When I get to where the crown section or the parietal ridge would be, I'm going to go 90 and then over direct it a little bit to 180, but not as far. And that's going to give her a nice silhouette on the side, going from more tapered here to more volume here. I don't like to create too much here, so I don't want to create all this volume on the side. It's going to elongate her head this way. It's going to give her alien head shape. By going with the natural round of the head tapers in more, so I'm going to cater my blow dry to that. It gets a little larger here at the occipital, so I'm going to cater to that. It gets a little larger here in the parietal, so I'm going to cater to that. When I get to the sides of the parietal, I want to make sure I'm not over directing too much. Since that bone does sit out from the head, we don't want to pull it out too much to create too wide of a silhouette this way. We still want this to be as consistent as we were in the back. Unless your guest does have a really, really wide parietal ridge, we can cater our direction for that so we can kind of camouflage it and make it not look as large. So you have a few options when you're blow drying as well, how you want to hold your blow dryer. I hold it like this when I'm doing a flat wrap or paddle brush just to make it nice and smooth. I hold it like this when I'm doing a round brush. You can hold it either way. You can hold it up here. Whatever feels more comfortable for you is all that matters. Just keep in mind how you hold it for a long time is going to play effect of what it does to your body. So holding it like this, wear and tear, front of your shoulder, rotator cuff, shoulder blade, elbow, wrist. So those are all full tension all the time when you hold it like this. So you're blow drying with this motion. If you do end up holding it this way to drop your elbow, or hold it this way, that actually is more ergonomically correct for your shoulder and for your rotator cuff. So it's more this motion. So you're going to feel less pain there, but you don't really have as much control with over direction in your round brush and using the nozzle if you wanted to catch the hair. I'm going to comb it through. And I am blow drying with where her hair falls naturally. So on the round back here, this section, I'm pulling it out with the round of the head here. I'm not over directing it back to the center to blow dry it because her hair wants to fall here, so I want to blow dry with how it wants to fall. Try not to fight the natural curve of the head and try not to fight the natural fall of the hair. It gives you more of a nice blowout, and when you don't have to fight against natural growth patterns, it makes your life a lot easier and the hair behaves a lot better. So I'm going to go up a little bit higher than about 60 degrees, but not a true 90. And I'm still hitting it from the top and from the bottom. Make my brush vertical, so I'm dropping my elbow, and then I'm twisting and pulling together. And then you can see from the silhouette how it has a little bit more volume than the nape, but it's not excessively large out to the side where it makes her head look like her bone is protruding from her skull. So I'm going to go ahead and drop my next subsection, and these are thin enough I don't have to separate these, and I'm probably going to do this in 3 again because her head's not that wide. I'm going to start on this side first. So since we're right below the parietal, we want to add a little bit more volume. This is where people want to see volume within their hairstyle or within their blow dry, usually. And that's kind of where we're lagging volume with our natural round of our head. So the parietal sticks out pretty far. Right below it, it kind of divots in. So we want to add a little bit more volume here on the sides, right below the parietal, so right in here. Just so it kind of mimics that the parietal is larger than it is, so that the silhouette or the profile looks the same from top to bottom. It looks more oval from top to bottom. So in order for me to do that consistent, I'm going to hit my subsection from the top and the bottom, and I'm going to over direct it right and left. What that is going to do is going to make my subsection have a ton of movement. So when we blow dry from every possible direction, I'm going to take my subsection so I can show you. If this is my subsection here, I'm going to blow dry. I'm going to blow dry the top. I'm going to blow dry the bottom. I'm going to over direct it up, not to all the way 180. I'm going to over direct it to my left, and I'm going to over direct it to my right. What that is going to do when that hair section actually cools, it's going to give her movement on all 4 sides of this subsection. When you only blow dry top and bottom, the only movement you have is top and bottom. So when you start to take your section and think of how you want the hair to flow if your guest was walking out of the salon or shaking their head, we want it to have a lot of movement. When you blow dry all 4 sides, it creates a ton of air within her head. So if you have a guest that says their hair always feels light after a blowout, that's because you create a lot of lightness and volume within your subsection. And that's really easy to do when we do top, bottom, left, right. It makes her hair look like she just naturally walked out like that, naturally wakes up like that, even though it required us to do a lot of work within that section, but it does look more natural for her, and she'll get more longevity out of the blowout because we did control it to go all over with the round of the head. So she'll get more volume for a longer amount of time, and she'll get actually better oil distribution if you blow dry from all 4 sides, because all the strands were from all sides. All the strands were attacked with the same heat and the same tension. So as the hair starts to drop or your natural sebum starts to come in, it's going to come in consistent on all strands. So I'm going to start here on the side, and I'm going to start pulling up to create more volume. Still only focusing on zone 1. Making sure that you feel the heat from your blow dryer and not your guest. Now I'm going to come underneath, still over directing it up. Now I'm going to go to my left, and then to my right. So it'll be up, under, left, right. Now that I have that hot enough, I'm going to bring it down to 2 and 3. Rolling my brush to create tension so I get a nice curl. So to keep this volume here, I'm rolling the brush up closer to the head versus than I did at the occipital and the nape. So I want to maintain that volume so it matches my section above it to go with her shape of the head. So I'm going to let that cool off. And now since I have it closer to her head, it's going to be harder to drop it without the hair getting stuck in the brush. So keep it horizontal. See, I have it horizontal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unwrap it halfway, so it's just going to be like that, 1/2 turn. When I do 1/2 turn, I'm then going to drop my elbow, making my brush vertical. I'm going to pull my brush down, twist around my subsection, and when I twist, I'm pulling down. And then I'm not touching it. And you can see how much more volume that has compared to the section below it. So I want to make sure that I'm not picking the hair up below when I blow dry this. We want to keep them separate so we don't mess up what we just created at the bottom when we reformed all those bonds. You can see she has a nice gradation of volume from the nape up to the parietal. So now this is the section that is considered the parietal, and that includes a little bit of the sides. So I'm going to split it down the middle. I'm going to have 2 subsections on each side of my part. You can see. I'm going to blow dry 2 over here and 2 over here. So now here I am going to create, I don't want to over direct it too far over away from me to create too much volume since that bone does protrude out a lot. I'm going to go about 90 degrees, a little bit higher than 90. And then I'm going to drop my elevation just a little bit when I let it cool. Doesn't create too much volume there and make her look like a light bulb head. But we still want to see a little bit of volume. And I am still going to hit top, bottom, left, right because I want her to have a ton of movement when the blow dry is done. So I'm letting this cool a little further off from the head so it's more half face than what we did previously because it's going to be a little more full volume. The full volume here is going to hold this hair up for me, but not too much volume here so it doesn't look like our head's too large. Now if your guest wants a ton of volume, you can still over direct that and make that a little larger there. Just keep in mind what their bone structure is so the blow dry looks flattering to your head shape. So I'm going to drop my elbow, make my brush vertical, and go ahead and drop it down. got a nice little curl in there. It's kind of hard to see. There we go. Mannequin's not going to curl the best, but that's okay. If you do end up grabbing some of the hair underneath as you're blow drying, don't stress out. Stop, slow down, re-pick up your hair, push the hair out of the way. If you go slow and take nice, clean, consistent sections, you're going to be fine. When you try and grab too much hair, you get real greedy, you get frustrated, you start to grab too much hair in your brush. It becomes a mess, it gets tangled, it gets harder to blow dry, you get really frustrated, and then when you get frustrated, you give up. So if you take your time, go slow, doing a nice blowout is just about patience. Your speed will just come with time, so just keep that in mind. Remember, we want this to be nice and hot and a lot of tension, so you do have to, like rev in a motorcycle, you do have to roll the brush in your hand. If you don't actually roll the brush, you're not creating even tension on that section. You're not going to get it to blow dry nice and smooth. You're not going to seal the cuticle, and you won't get that nice curl when we drop the brush. What you're going to get is just a straight piece of hair, not a lot of volume, and flyaways at the bottom. So you have to make sure you're rotating your wrist to get it in there. But don't be excessive with the rotating. 1 or 2 rolls every single time you pass through is plenty. You don't have to, let me drop this. I'll show you on this one. You don't have to over excessively rotate the brush. It causes a lot of wear and tear on your ligaments in your wrist, and it's not necessary. Make sure you guys can see my wrist. You see my fingers rolling. I only roll it twice, and then I resection to grab the hair again. If you try and roll it too much, it'll get tangled in the brush. Also remember that it takes about 2.5 turns around a roller to get a full curl. So just by doing 2 rolls with the brush, you're creating almost a full curl. So you're getting basically almost a full C shape within that section we're trying to dry as we're moving down the head. So more than 2 or 3 passes of rolling the brush is not necessary. That's my last section here at the parietal. Now all I have left is the top. If your guest is too tall, make sure you lower your chair. I'm going to lower my tripod just a little. It takes a lot of strain off your upper back, it takes a lot of strain off your arms and your shoulders as well, if you can adjust the chair for your guest when you're doing a blowout like this. So I'm going to take my top section that I just dropped. I'm going to split it into 2, so I have my top half and my bottom half. I'm going to approach both of those separately because of how the head rounds. So back here, this is the crown. So we have a calyx, growth patterns, all that kind of stuff that lives in that area. So I'm going to blow dry this standing behind her so I can kind of cover and mask that. That's also where people want to see volume. So I'm going to over direct it towards her face to create a lot of volume there to give her height. So she'll have more height here in the crown. She'll have medium height, less height, almost no height. So she'll have a nice even silhouette from top down. The top section up here in the front, I am going to stand in front of her and blow dry it because the head starts to round this way. So it's going to make more sense for me to stand with the round of the head and blow dry the hair that way. It'll be more comfortable for your guests, and it's actually a better body position for you as well. That way your guest is not like this trying to get their hair blow dried. They need to be comfortable when they're sitting there. We can keep their head neutral and we can adjust where we stand to make it better for them. I'm going to take my centerpiece in that section. I'm going to fill it through. I'm going to start drying it. When I see that it's getting closer to like that 70-80% dry, I'm going to start over directing it away from me to get the volume at the root. Moving. The more you over direct it away from you, the more height you're going to get in that section. Still incorporating my left to right. So the biggest difference there was I kept it at 90 degrees and rolled it down versus pulling it out or down and rolling it. So I want to keep as much volume in that section as it cools as possible. So remember, when we're that close to the scalp, so we don't create a dreadlock in the brush, we are going to unwind halfway, 1/2 turn, drop the elbow, make it vertical, drop the brush, twist and pull. I only have a tiny little piece on this side. So I always have my blow dryer in my arm too, even when I'm working on a guest, so I don't have to keep putting it down. Keep putting it on my station. So now I'm at the last section, that is right at the top, going towards where the head starts to curve forward. So I don't have to have my guest lean back when I blow dry. I'm going to stand in front of her. I'm still going to direct the hair back to go with that back of the head so it creates volume going from about to the apex back. I will be in front of her for that purpose. So I'm going to be blow drying that, so I split that subsection into two. I'm just going to clip this out of the way so I don't accidentally grab it. So I'm going to manipulate both of those sections in here, same thing, top, bottom, left, right. So I'm going to end it by over directing it away from me with my brush underneath my section, like that. Alright, so I'm going to split this in two because it's too much hair to work with. Alright. Still going left, right, and top and bottom. You want to make sure I get that whole section really hot. change direction on my body, position in that whole section. If I want to move and stand behind her, I can. Just be aware of what your guest head position is doing so she's still comfortable. So that's pretty dry, so I'm going to end it with her nose is right here. I'm standing in front of her. I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to put it behind my section. So it's going to look like that. This is the front of her, so that's my brush. I'm going to pull the brush towards me. I'm going to over direct the hair towards me. My brush is staying behind my section. That's going to make sure that we don't see any demarcation line from the section we had clipped up. So create all this volume underneath. Keeps her in a neutral position so she's not leaning back. And it's actually less wear and tear on our arms because we don't have to stretch or lean over her to get to that area. So the more I over direct it towards me, the more volume it's going to create. So I'm going to do a few passes with their section lying on the head, bringing it to me, and then I'm going to do a few passes about 90 degrees, and then I'm going to start bringing it up to 180, and then I'm going to roll it down. Let it cool. And unwind halfway. And then I'm going to twist. If you need to move, so you don't get the brush stuck, you can move your body, that's fine. So now you can see she still has a good amount of volume right here in that section. But we didn't make ourselves uncomfortable in the process, and we didn't make her uncomfortable, which is even more important. So now I'm going to finish this other subsection that I dropped. Now I have my last small subsection left at the top. I'm approaching that same way I just did the other one. Nothing fancy, nothing new. When you are blow drying the front, since this is her nose, as long as you're hitting it from all four sides, you want to make sure you're not only blow drying from this direction, because that's going to create a lot of volume here. It's going to create a demarcation from where the hair that we blow dried in the back is going back, and this is going forward. So even though I'm standing here, I want to make sure I'm still ending my section, that it's blow dried to go back or to go with the natural fall. Try not to only focus on blow drying the front of the head with your brush facing you. We want the brush away from us and the hair facing us. Still hitting left and right. Small section here that's still wet. Alright, so that is all sections on the head. So before I go ahead and rub my fingers all in there, because it's still cooling because I just finished. So Normally I just have a guest like lightly shake their head so we don't disrupt the curl too much. But you can like loosely touch it with your fingers, break it up with your fingernails. You can use a wide tooth comb if you want. Try and let the hair fall where it naturally falls, unless your guest is super adamant about having a set part. Then just cater for your guests in that area. So the mannequin's not going to give you a ton of curl in there, but you can see she's got a ton of body. I'm going to take a step back, it's probably easier to see. She's got a ton of lift. So, and you can always change her part if you need to, but hers looks like it wants to go off this way, so I'm not really going to fight it. And you can tell your guests that too. It's easier for them if they don't fight their natural fall or fight their natural part. If for some reason when you are blow drying or blowing it out, if they have like a demarcation line and you can't get rid of it, or it's like a demarcation line that's really flat around the part, a real easy way to get rid of that is kind of like how we started in the fringe area. Take 2 small sections around where the part is. I'm going to part her so you know what I'm talking about. So if she had a part here and you didn't like the way that looked, take a small section on each side of her part. So it'd be like this. You're going to take your brush. Let me come down. You're going to stand in front of her, so this is her nose here. You can put your brush behind your section hairs in front of you. Over direct that hair towards you. And then up. And make sure you let it cool that way. That will get rid of that demarcation line that she had from the part that maybe she didn't like, or she's trying to fight her natural part, or the clips were just, the hair started to dry within the clips, so you couldn't get rid of that demarcation line no matter how hard you blow dried. So you could change your parting that way if that does happen. I don't suggest relying on that method just because the hair's already dry, so we don't want to have to go in there and cause a lot of wear and tear to hair that we've already dried. But if you get that section hot enough, we can still break those hydrogen and salt bonds and reform them in the shape that we need. If it does come down to that, so you don't have to re-wet it. So product wise, I would stick with something aerosol. Nothing too wet so we don't mess up the hair that we just dried. And then she'll have a ton of lift and a ton of movement. You don't see through the hair in the bottom because we didn't create a lot of volume in the nape. She's got a pretty nice silhouette. She has height here and height here, but it's not like really, really large. It's not really far out, it's not protruding. It looks flattering for the head shape. Obviously you can cater to whatever your guest desires are. If your guest wants really, really, really big hair, you can make it as big as you need to, as long as you're over directing. Just remember, small sections, work slow, be patient, don't get greedy. No need to rotate the brush 1,000 times in the head to make a curl. 2 or 3 rotations per section before you grab it again is going to be plenty. Direct the heat towards you, over direct for more volume, and consider the round of the head. Consider what her head shape looks like. Try and give her the most flattering blow dry for that person. Try and think of it as you would a haircut or a color. The blow dry can be just as important, and it can make or break the color service you did or the haircut you just did. So hopefully that helps you with some little tips or tricks, or maybe just watch me blow dry makes you feel a little bit more comfortable blow drying too. So I guess that's it.